Joe. All right, we're going to be starting in 1 minute. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Braintree Town Council meeting for Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. Could you please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can you please remain standing for a moment and join me in a moment of silence for our men and women in uniform, and if we could remember Fred Hansen also. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilor Barica?
Here.
Councilor Flaherty?
Here.
Councilor Hume?
Here.
Councilor Maglio? Is presently not here. Councilor Moran?
Here.
Councilor Quilty?
Here.
Councilor Reynolds?
Here.
Councilor Ringus?
Here.
Councilor Ryan?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the agenda, we did have it scheduled for the Norfolk probate, the Register of Probate from Norfolk County, Colleen Briley, being here tonight, but she was unable to make it, and we are going to reschedule her for a later date. And at this time, I'd like to ask if there are any announcements from the council. Okay, I have an announcement. There is going to be the annual rabies clinic, and it's going to be held this Saturday, May 4th, 2024, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., and it's going to be at Town Hall on the side entrance. The annual rabies clinic is sponsored by the Town of Braintree, the Braintree J.C.'s, and Dr. Joseph Kosman, DVM. The vaccination fee per animal is $15. And the folks that are coming are asked to bring their animal's current rabies certification. So again, that's this Saturday, 10 to 12 at Town Hall. Are there any other announcements from the council? Okay. The next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from April 2nd. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Mr. President.
Do we have a second?
Second. Sorry.
That's all right. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is 01224, the mayor, the FY25 budget submission. I just want to go through what we're going to do tonight. Mayor Joyce is in attendance to submit the budget. We're not going to take any comments on the budget tonight. This is just the budget submission. We do have a schedule for when the council will be reviewing the budget, and we'll be reviewing that on May 6th, 8th, 13th, the 14th, the 15th, the 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd and 23rd if need be. And then we'll be having our council meeting on May 29th to go through the budget. Just so everybody knows, that's the schedule. The Committee on Ways and Means will be the ones reviewing the budget. And as I said, the public hearing will be on May 29th at 7 p.m. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mayor Joyce. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, Council President Ryan and councilors. I want to start by just thanking all of you for your service to Braintree and for being engaged in our conversation here this evening as we present the Town of Braintree's fiscal year 2025 budget, which will be the budget for our upcoming fiscal year beginning on July 1st of this year. Before I begin diving into the numbers, I did pass out the complete budget book, which is spiral bound. That will also be going live on the website this evening, along with the presentation. And I did pass out a copy of the slide deck for your reference that we will be using tonight. I want to take a moment to pause, to take a moment and appreciate being at this podium this evening with the immense opportunity to present my first town budget, which comes with a few other firsts. The first budget submitted by a female mayor, and the first budget presenting voters with the option for an override request. An opportunity for voters to have a say in potential additional town resources to fund the services and programs that make Braintree, well, Braintree. I will certainly spend more time with the details of a potential override in my comments ahead, but I also want to take a moment to thank my family for their extra support in these last few months as I took over the position of mayor and transitioned into a new job, so to speak. I think they're at Watson Park tonight. So given our current schedule in the evenings, I have about a 75% chance of being right and finding them there, either on the fields or the playground or at the snack shack, probably fighting over if they should get another slush puppy or not. So, in going into preparing my remarks for this evening, I had envisioned a conversation celebrating accomplishments of the last year and hopeful spending goals, and I want to be clear that even though this presentation feels a bit different than maybe years past, we are, by creation of this budget, identifying a strategic and hopeful path forward. Even though we are facing major challenges, as you'll see, I will still be showing up every day at Town Hall working hard for our residents and bringing more resources to Braintree, and I am incredibly hopeful for the years ahead. Braintree sits in a strong geographic region with huge economic opportunities, which we are fully capable of realizing in the years to come. We just need to make some strategic decisions today and in the weeks ahead to put us on that path. The ability to have a voice to a budgetary solution, to address an embedded and complex puzzle of revenue and spending, to place Braintree on a sustainable and upward path towards fiscal resiliency is something I am very appreciative of the voters to have given me by electing me as mayor, and I am privileged to be standing here tonight presenting this budget on behalf of the town of Braintree. My first budget is one that I knew would be challenging, but I've enjoyed working through the complexities. This budget process has offered me an opportunity to dig into all the inner workings of our town government and to get to know our department heads and their teams. As many of you know, during the process of kicking off planning for fiscal year 25, we lost our longtime finance director, Mr. Ed Spellman, to what we hope is a glorious retirement in mid-February. So while we were relatively quick in transitioning and bringing on our new finance director, Mike Esmond, who started in March, we did have some challenges in getting internally caught up to speed on existing town processes and record keeping. We also knew that going into fiscal year 25, we wanted to have a 3-year look ahead for our budget, and that any planning we did for fiscal year 25, both in revenue projections and spending, would be tied to that look ahead. We wanted to keep our eyes on long-term stability and how decisions we make this year could impact our financial situation moving forward, for the better or for the worse, and I hope we're able to describe that in a way that is approachable this evening. I also want to recognize my department heads, many of whom are here tonight sitting behind me, who have been invaluable in identifying some challenging decisions that would be made in the preparation of this budget, while always keeping their sights on managing through. No matter what our outcome will be pending the override vote to residents this spring, we know that they will be showing up, as I mentioned earlier, at Town Hall working on behalf of the residents every day. Sharmila Biswas with the Council on Aging and Elder Affairs, Mike Esmond, our Finance Director, Fire Chief Jim O'Brien, Chris Ships, our new Human Resources Director, Mary Beth McGrath and Russ Forsberg in our inspections and licensing department, Terry Stano, our library director at Thayer Public Library, Karen Nyman, my chief of staff and director of operations, Melissa Santucci-Razi, director of planning and community development, Police Chief Tim Cahoon, Public Works Director Jim Arsenal and his team, Ben Hulk, Jeff Kuntz, John Thompson, Hillary Waite, Ben Hulk, and Chris Griffin. I would not have been able to pull this together without their help, and for that, I am very grateful. I'm especially thankful to our big four departments, school, fire, police, and public works, because collectively these departments make up the majority of our spending and have spent exhaustive amounts of time and budget iterations in the past few weeks directed at understanding the true all-in yearly cost of department operations so we could best plan for fiscal year 25 and beyond. While the school department budget was given many months of public debate, as we've seen, we have been having similar discussions internally for the other departments, and I hope to highlight some of those considerations this evening. Going into fiscal year 25, we were faced with an embedded $18 million structural operating deficit, which I did bring to the attention of the council in remarks in March as an update to where we were starting. This goes back fundamentally to decisions made in prior years to fund growing operational expenses that would be reoccurring with one-time funds. Looking just back at the 24 budget presentation to the town council last May, you will see that the prior administration balanced the budget deficit by using $4.3 million in free cash. As we've said before, and as many of you probably already know, free cash is the town's rainy day fund to be used for emergency expenditures. This account is not meant to plug gaps in an operating budget because it's a one-time fix for a permanent annual budget deficit. This deficit will repeat every year into the future unless a permanent reoccurring revenue source is identified or expenses cut are implemented to balance the budget. In the fiscal year 24 budget, neither permanent spending cuts nor sufficient reoccurring revenue sources were identified to balance the budget in fiscal year 24 and beyond. Furthermore, once I took office in January, I discovered that the fiscal year 24 budget was understated by $3 million. In other words, the fiscal year 24 year-end deficit is projected to be $7.3 million. This deficit is permanent unless expenses are cut or revenue is raised, or a combination of both. Looking towards fiscal year 25, we also saw immediate pension and healthcare increases of $1.5 million. We saw an initial school department request of an additional $10 million, and projected increases to debt service, commitments we made to fund town unions through collective bargaining agreements. Let's take a look at projections of the revenue and spending outlook going into fiscal year 25 planning. For the look-ahead projections, we assumed 2 to 3% on revenue growth, and for spending, we generally assumed 5% spending for the schools and 2.5% spending for general government. As you can see, the operational deficit grows year over year, and the cumulative gap projects to be over $90 million by fiscal year 28. To put this crisis into perspective, our town's revenue growth for fiscal year 25 is projected at $4.4 million, essentially the same amount of free cash we used to cover the operational gap first identified in fiscal year 24's budget, which means even with all the town's growing expenses between fiscal year 24 and 25, we are essentially planning a flatline revenue projection for fiscal year 24. $4 million in organic new reoccurring revenue growth when we have significant needs in our schools and townside departments that are unable to be met. So what is our plan, and how do we reconcile and close the $18 million gap initially identified at the onset of fiscal year 25 planning? We looked at cutting expenses, which are widely related to personnel costs, and that alone does not address the underlying problem. The cuts required also bring departments significantly below fiscal year 24 projected levels. In January, I took immediate action to begin controlling town-side spending, implementing hiring freezes across all town departments and adding a level of spending review for all expenses over $1,000. With our anticipated year-over-year organic growth, without a level of reliable increase in base revenue, cutting alone does not solve our structural deficit, and the cuts alone would significantly impact town services. As I've stated publicly in the last few weeks, this expense growth needs to be comparable to overall town revenue growth, which has generally been stagnant at around 2 to 3% for the past several years. To bring the spending under control and more in line with town revenue growth, we have been able to make a level of cuts to reduce our fiscal year 25 planning budget, but to bring spending into complete alignment with current tax base and projected growth, we would see deep cuts to schools, public safety, and public works. For schools, we've been able to watch at school committee meetings these past few weeks. They've publicly discussed what level funding would look like for Braintree Public Schools, and we've heard versions of potential cuts upwards of 90 teaching positions and significant programming loss across all education levels. For our town-side services, police, fire, and DPW, this means eliminating public safety programming and potentially reducing personnel, reducing schools and town building maintenance staff, significantly reducing sidewalk and roadway repair projects, and reducing summer programming hosted by our Parks and Recreation Department. The importance of our look ahead is most apparent when we start to look at these cuts, which could bring us into alignment on revenue for fiscal year 25. But playing into long-term planning, we have to look at what the cuts do year over year and do they solve the problem. So what happens if we cut this year? What happens next year? Well, as you can see here, assuming the revenue and spending metrics mentioned earlier, the 2 to 3% on revenue growth, and 5% spending growth for schools and 2.5% per general government spending remain generally the same. Fiscal year 26 brings more spending cuts. While we've shrunk our cumulative gap by fiscal year 28 to about $15 million, which is significantly less than $91 million, which we started out with, we have not solved the problem with cutting alone. We will be back next year with similar conversations. What can we live without? But instead, we are turning to what can we do to offer a chance for voters to weigh in on the path ahead. After 4 months of immersive conversation with all of our town departments and personnel, and understanding the service impact this level of cutting brings without effectively solving our structural deficit, I believe voters need to be offered the decision to allow the town an option to increase our tax levy this year by $8 million, to supply $8 million of additional, reliable, reoccurring revenue to close this structural deficit. Through the override vote, our residents will have the ability to use their voice to support either a budget without an override, as shown here, or to support the balanced approach we are proposing by presenting the option of a tax override for fiscal year 25. A tax override is a tool communities can use to boost the amount of town revenue that comes in annually through property taxes. Without asking the voters, cities and towns can increase their tax levy, which is the amount of money they collect in property taxes, both residential and commercial, by up to 2.5% every year. Braintree does add this percent every year. Even with adding this every year, we're falling behind, as you've seen on our past slides, as evidenced here tonight and in many conversations we've been having year over year around town about why we can't get ahead of the problem, why are we always cutting, why are we always talking about what we can live without. Where we are today has not happened overnight. What the town brings in for revenue is simply not keeping up with even our operational spending, let alone allowing us to get ahead to a point where we can invest in new buildings, new schools, new parks. We are also not seeing large amounts of new growth or economic development that could potentially offset our 2.5% restriction. We, as administrators, cannot add more than 2.5% to the tax levy because of a law passed in the 80s that restricts the amount that cities and towns can raise property taxes. If you've heard of Proposition 2.5, that's what that law refers to. So a Proposition 2.5 override, or Prop 2.5 override, or simply override, is a ballot question that can allow cities and towns to, in a single year, add more than 2.5% to their tax levy. The ballot question for an override asks residents to raise taxes. The ballot question is put out to voters in a special election that is held only for the purpose of the question. Tonight, we are proposing an override to raise $8 million more annually, and later in the meeting, the Town Council will be voting on potential same-night action to call for this special election on June 15th for the purposes of asking voters if they will support this motion. The $8 million override supports a multi-year, balanced approach that closes our $18 million deficit in fiscal year '25 with a level of cuts and a level of additional funding provided by the override. Simply put, we can't cut our way out of this problem, and we can't spend our way out of this problem. It needs to be a balanced approach. What I will highlight tonight with regards to the $8 million override is that the override will be split as follows. Braintree Public Schools will receive $4 million additional to fund an operational budget of $79.5 million, which will preserve programs and teachers. And in addition to the operational budget allocation, we will be setting aside $500,000 in a townside reserve to cover potential one-time school spending needs, putting the fiscal year '25 anticipated with override school-side spending at $80 million. Public safety will receive $1.5 million to preserve core police services and positioning them to be more forward-looking in planning. It will also allow the department to bring back programming elements that have been recently reduced and lost, such as our traffic unit and school resource officers on the police side. Public Works will receive $1 million, a bulk of which will preserve town and school maintenance efforts, maintain roadway and sidewalk maintenance projects, summer programming, sports field maintenance, and importantly, building maintenance for so much of our aging school and town buildings infrastructure. We're also including an establishment of an override stabilization account, which will be funded at $1.5 million. The reserves will be deposited into the stabilization account to extend the benefit of the override through fiscal year '28. Let's look at the outlook with the override. What is notable here is that no more one-time funds are being used, but also there is new reoccurring revenue to support initially reduced and then managed spending. The only way our override can be truly impactful and long-lasting is if we couple this outlook with strong management, and we will do just that. Targeting to manage expected spending across all departments to be in line with normal organic town growth of 2 to 3% as we work to bring in more new growth through economic development to fund future growth of some of our department needs. I appreciate your attention and time you've allowed me this evening to review the hard work of my team in the past few months as we strategically chart a path forward for Braintree. When I bump into people around town, so many people ask how I'm doing or suggest that maybe they wouldn't want to be standing up here tonight if they were me. I can assure you that I feel incredibly humble but able to stand here to be able to stand here tonight and present what feels like a very hopeful path forward, a well thought out and strategic path forward with buy-in from our town departments. But I will say, I absolutely do not take lightly any ask for a resident to have to contribute more. I understand the many financial challenges our young families face. I have a young family myself. Seniors on fixed incomes and young adults just getting started in Braintree face many financial challenges. In the days ahead, we will be providing tools to residents to estimate the impact of an override on them individually. I can say, just generally speaking, based on an average home value in Braintree of $668,000, the approximate impact of an $8 million override would be an increase of approximately $450 annually. For seniors, the town also offers discounted trash fees and property tax relief for income-qualified households, as well as a work-off program that offers seniors the ability to exchange town employment for tax discount. We also will be exploring opportunities to expand our income qualified relief for seniors with our state representatives in the weeks ahead. Accompanying our presentation tonight is the detailed budget book. Has a bit of a new look and some more information. This book shares a great amount of detail for the budget and also provides an executive summary, diving a bit more into the detail that I shared this evening with supporting information and a lot more numbers. As we move through the budget season with Ways and Means in the month of May, we will have designated meetings with each town department and delve into specifics related to funding with and without the override. And these meetings, just as a reminder, are open to the public, and I invite those of you who are interested to attend and learn more. In closing, I would offer this. For my administration, fiscal stability is and will continue to be a functional obsession. With an override success or failure, we will intimately understand, discuss, and challenge each other with what living within the town's resources means. And then as residents, leaders, anyone with a hope for Braintree, we have to get out there and advocate and bring in more resources for our town. During the pandemic, I took to hiking. I began to pick away at the New Hampshire 48. I don't know if any of you are hikers, but the New Hampshire 48 are 48 peaks in New Hampshire that are 4,000 feet above sea level or more. The funny thing about hiking is every mountain starts out the same, looking way easier to climb when standing at the bottom than when you're halfway up. But you all know what I'm going to say when you get to the top. The view's worth it. I imagine in the weeks ahead, we'll foster more challenging conversations, and I know that Braintree will be stronger and fiscally resilient at the end of this process, no matter the outcome. I hope I've been able to show you the options for moving forward in a way that's understandable and able to be shared and talked about amongst your neighbors and the town. And I hope as we work together in the next few weeks, our view and outlook will change from feeling like we're never going to pull out of this to embracing a solution that will work. At the end of the day, I do believe very strongly in allowing voters to have a say in what we do. But I want to make sure they have as much information as possible, because the only way through this challenging time is to band together as a community and have these challenging conversations together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Joyce. Okay, so we are going to be having same-night action a little later in the agenda for the override. But following the agenda now, we have some other business to do. So our old business, the next two orders are still going through the committee process, and we're going to open and continue these public hearings to May 29, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. So unless anyone objects. So 22012, Mayor Zoning Bylaw Text Amendment, inclusionary housing and associated revisions, or take up any action related thereto. We're going to continue that public hearing to May 29th at 7:30 p.m. And 23080, Mayor CPC appropriation, request for appropriation for fire station historic restoration, or take up any action related thereto. We're going to continue that public hearing to May 29th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. So is there a motion to open the public hearings for these orders and continue them to May 29th?
Mr. President, motion to open the public hearing for Order 22012 and Order 23080.
So we have a motion to open the public hearings.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. And now do we have a motion to continue those two public hearings to May 29th?
Mr. President, I would ask that we motion to continue the public hearing for Order 22012 and 23080 to May 29th, 2024 at the Town Council 7:30 p.m. meeting.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is 24009, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Boston petition for zoning map amendments, 338 Elm Street, map 2071, plot 5, and 0 Elm Street, AKA 7 Hawthorne Road, map 2065, 2024/34, or take up any action related thereto. There's a public hearing. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing for Order 24009?
So moved, Mr. President.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. So we have the public hearing open. First, I'm going to go to Councilor Ringus, who's the chairman of the Committee on Ordinance and Rules, for a recommendation on, do you want to give the recommendation, or do you want to hear from the presenter first?
I will give the recommendation that we can hear from the
Okay, so
presenter.
we're going to get a recommendation from Councilor Ringus for on 24009. Councilor Ringus.
Mr. President, the Committee of Ordinance and Rules met twice on this, on March 27th, where we had a public hearing, residents were allowed to speak, and April 10th, and the committee on that April 10th date voted unanimously for a favorable recommendation to the full council as to Order 24009.
Thank you, Councilor Ringus. And the next thing I wanted to ask if Melissa Santucci, the director, had any recommendations, the planning board's recommendation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. Melissa Santucci-Rossi here, Planning and Community Development. I did circulate a report to the council members, also appeared at the first Ordinance and Rules Committee meeting. The Planning Board did hear this matter in March, and they issued a favorable recommendation. It was a, just double checking the vote. Was a 3 in favor, 2 opposed for a favorable recommendation. Would you like me to go into any other details this evening, Mr. Chairman?
Anything that you see fit would be okay? Sure.
I can just briefly kind of summarize. I think the main gist of this rezone, and dating back to probably about a year ago, we had some initial discussions with the Archdiocese when they came to us under the former administration and shared that they would be selling the property. And frankly, immediately, we started engaging in discussions about rezoning the property. And those discussions revolved around a potential cluster zoning or the Residence C zoning district. And frankly, the primary goal here is to allow for the property to be redeveloped in a clustered manner and to allow for multiple residential units to be constructed, but also to allow for the preservation of trees and buffering for the neighborhoods. That was really the main points that we had hit on, even with the Archdiocese, and in continued discussions with Mr. Clements and his partner as we continue to move forward through this process. As noted in my staff report and in the planning board report, we don't have a lot of large tracts of land left in Braintree. And frankly, this is an opportunity to start to put the wheels in motion for 55-plus development. We've been talking about it for a long time, probably a decade. We had a lot of discussion around that during our master planning process, and the idea and opportunity to really create a community and get that saturation of the number of units to really provide something valuable to seniors here in the community that don't want to live in something that's a little bit larger and more multifamily structured. They want something that is similar to the home that they had here in the community for quite some years. So a lot of opportunity here. I hope the council members see that as well. And really, I think this is the piece that will, not speaking for Mr. Clements, but set him in motion and really starting to advance his plans and invest in all of the costs associated with developing this site and through permitting. So I'm here. I can answer any other questions as they come up, and I'll go back to my seat. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now at this time, I'm going to ask the petitioner if they'd like to speak, and I see Mr. Clements and Mr. Modestino are here. Good evening, Mr. Modestino.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. Michael Modestino representing George Clements, manager of Clements Investments, LLC, and Charles Batchelder, the manager of Bass Realty, LLC. I call them the Hawthorne Preserve Development Team. My clients are requesting a rezoning of this area. It consists of 11.79 acres of land at 338 Elm Street and a second lot on Elm Street, also known as 7 Hawthorne Road, which is where the St. Thomas More Church is located. As we know, the church has been closed for a number of years, and the St. Thomas More School has been closed for many, many years. My clients have the subject property under agreement and are planning on closing on this property with the Archdiocese in June of 2024. My clients are seeking a zoning change from the council from Residence B to Residence C. The reason for this is that Residence C would allow a much more flexible options in accordance with the town's master plan. My clients are here. They're here to answer any technical questions that you may have about the project. The whole idea is to build townhomes and townhouses, 48 units altogether. They would be spread out over an area of land. There's been some discussion, there's been some concern. We've appeared before the Historical Commission about the church, and my clients are looking into seeing what they can do with the church. There is some possibility, if the town wants and if the public wants, to develop the church as well and reuse it and make that into some units as well. In terms of the reasons behind this, under the current zoning that's in effect, Residence B, this would allow for approximately 26 single-family homes, and they would be allowed under the so-called Dover Amendment. The homes would consist of houses with 4 or 5 bedrooms, 2 or 3 baths, and two-car parking garages, and about 3,000 square feet of living space. A rezoning of the property from Residence B to Residence C would permit the opportunity to allow substantial land preservation as under the client's plan. Not all this plan area would be developed. There would be at least anywhere between 3 and 5 acres of land that would be left for conservation land and wouldn't be donated to the town if the town wanted it. A rezoning of the subject property would permit an opportunity to create diverse housing that the town is in much need of. As we know, we have no over 55 housing in Braintree. Many residents have come to us and said that they would really like to have this in the town. They'd like to sell their homes. They'd like to stay here and purchase a over 55 townhome. A rezoning would substantially reduce land clearing and protect the existing tree canopy, as well as reducing the overall asphalt roadways and light pollution. Rezoning would allow the town of Braintree an opportunity to work with the landowners to provide the town with significant traffic calming mitigation through a flexible design. We know traffic is always going to be an issue. They would work very, very hard to try to make that work. With the rezoning, there'd be an opportunity to increase the current tax revenues for the town. Ultimately, this land will be developed in some capacity. It's almost a 12-acre parcel. That type of land is in much need in this town. It would be more beneficial to the town and the surrounding neighborhoods to have this type of over 55 housing project that is reasonable in scope and more manageable for the town's services than other alternatives that may be available for the development of a 12-acre parcel. That's really all I have to say. I know that there are members of the public out there that certainly would want to be heard. I want to thank Councilor Reynolds for helping us with this and scheduling 2 meetings in this town hall that were very productive and I think helped the process along, and I want to thank him for that. Mr. Clements, do you want to say anything?
Good evening, George Clements. So just to kind of reiterate Attorney Modestino's explanation, we've been looking at the St. Thomas More property for the better part of 4 years, working with the Archdiocese on this. We view this as a tremendous opportunity, being one of the, in my belief, is one of the last large tracts of land to create this type of housing. I've looked at creating 55 plus housing in the community on several occasions, which have never come to fruition. I think in today's world, this is a dire need, this type of housing. I think it frees up some of the older folks that would like to stay in town and enhancing upon all of the things that Mr. Modestino had spoken to earlier. But I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's going to provide the town significant tax revenue. This is a piece of property that's never paid a tax dollar to the town of Braintree. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to look at this and maximize those dollars certainly using the 55 plus would be the maximum extent of tax revenue from a development. It's not a redevelopment, it's a new development and new tax revenue. So hopefully that's that weighs in on your decision. But again, we are committed to this project. We do look forward to moving the process through as quick as possible so that we can deliver on our commitment. So I thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you. So normally we would have the, any councilors' questions now. So if any councilors have any questions from the proponents, I know that we have some folks from the public that want to speak also. So I'm going to let councilors ask questions after the public or make statements after the public as well. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. So does anybody have any questions for the proponent? Council Baraka?
Thank you, President Ryan. I have one question. It probably is for Director Santucci-Razzi, just a clarifying question. The height for residence C, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. My understanding, it is the same as the height requirements for residence B. Is that accurate?
That is
So
correct, Counselor.
3 stories is the maximum height allowable and would be the maximum height allowable if this rezone were to pass.
3 stories, 35 feet, correct.
Thank you very much. That
You're
was
welcome.
it.
Thank you. Do any other councilors have any questions or comments? Councilor Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is directed toward the project managers here. So do you see this as an opportunity to improve some of the existing problems in the area? I'm talking about runoff, flooding, et cetera. We know that this is more or less, this location, there is a part of the location that is the low point of the entire area. So could you talk a little bit about any kind of opportunities that you might have in that area?
Sure. So in assessing the property, many years back, the town took an easement, and we have a lot of road runoff that dumps directly onto the property. Over years of not maintaining that, it has been mismanaged so that now we have water that runs straight over the asphalt. So through engineering, we see the opportunity to minimize. Obviously, the best way to create sufficient drainage is with natural resources. So under this plan, we minimize our roads, we minimize the use of the land, and I think that's going to solve a lot of the issues that you face with today. There is, these buildings are old. Certainly when the church was built, they didn't have the engineering that we have today that captures runoff and things of that nature. So, I view this as a much more environmentally friendly type project than what would be allowed by right. If we were to do what would be allowable under the Residence B, we're restricted to road widths, light, things of that nature. This is actually an opportunity for us to have our engineers come in and solve a lot of problems that may not be solvable under a Residence B. So yeah, I think there's great opportunity for good engineering to solve a lot of runoff issues. I think there's also a great opportunity with traffic mitigation measures. Again, under the current zoning, we're restricted. Under this, we have better opportunity to manage traffic in and out of the development and make some enhancement to that intersection on Elm and Middle Street. So I think there's a lot of autonomy.
Okay, and the reason I asked that question, my understanding is that we're not here to talk about a plan per se, a specific plan. And although we do need to have some type of assurances, and I think through engagement process and constant communication with the public, there has been a commitment to the type of use that you would like to see this property. Obviously, you've spent a lot of time, a lot of money and effort in order to articulate what this particular idea, this plan could be in terms of a future use of a rezoned site, of this particular site. So I think it's important for us to understand all of the various options that you may have as a property owner here, and what the impacts of some of these uses are, the pros, what are some of the cons. And to me, the runoff is and the geological, I guess, if that's the proper term to use here, is really important to the existing homes and abutters in the areas, and of course, on the site itself. It would have a multiplying beneficial effect. So I appreciate you giving us that sense.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Like I said, I think, you know, anytime we can cluster development the way that we're doing this is beneficial. It's less asphalt. So I think, you know, I think there's some work to do on these drawings, but I think through good engineering, we're going to solve a lot of the current issues that the residents are faced with now. There's been a lack of maintenance on the property. There's no secret there. It's falling into disrepair. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I hope that you'll support us in this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other questions, comments from the councilors? Okay, I have a question. So with the church, you mentioned that you might try to keep the church and rebuild and
Sure.
reimagine the church into residence. What's your preference and what's the plan if you can save the church and develop that, and what's the plan if you can't?
Well, I think there's a great opportunity for not only us as developers, but also the town. I think there's some benefit here. This is two parcels. It's not a single parcel. The church sits on its own parcel. So there may be an opportunity. Initially, when we looked at it, it's very hard to take a very old building that is substantially larger than what these smaller townhomes will be and try and blend those together. However, through this process and the meetings with the residents that Council Reynolds facilitated with us, we hear the outcry that some people would like to see the church preserved. That being said, I think if there's an opportunity for us to create almost two different developments, we're willing to look at it. It's a very costly endeavor to try and repurpose a specifically built property. But I think if there's a want and a desire and a benefit, we're certainly open to that. So I think, you know, in working with the planning staff, I've worked with the planning staff over many years on many projects, very creative, and I think, you know, as this evolves, there may be some great opportunity. Councilor Reynolds, we're working closely. I think, you know, I think we've shared some ideas, but ultimately, we are committed to the 48 townhouse, 55-plus development. That is our primary goal. What's before you this evening? If we were to make some changes, we can make them so that we stay with the bulk of this plan. The plan that's before you is really what we want to implement. If, in fact, we find that there is reason to try and work with the community to preserve the church, well, and there's benefit, then we would obviously look at that.
Okay, and the 55 and older, all the units are going to be 55 and older?
All townhouses would be 55 and over. We would not entertain doing a 55 and over style development within the church structure. It's not conducive to lifestyle. We're creating, what we're really doing here is we're creating a lifestyle. This is a lifestyle that, you know, people 55 and older, they want to live amongst, you know, their peers. It's a lifestyle. To try and, you know, we've seen 55-plus housing developments not be successful or get permitted and not go through on a multi-story building. That's not a lifestyle. That's an apartment or a condo. This 55-plus is successful when it's a lifestyle, and that's what we're creating.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the council at this time? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to open it up to comments from the general public. We had a sign-in sheet for people to get up and do comments. I want to remind everyone that we're going to allow 5-minute comments. We have 2 people that signed up for comments. The first person is Richard DiPaolo from 311 Union Street. Mr. DiPaolo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick DiPaolo, 311 Union Street. I rise in opposition. I like the developer, but I don't like the idea that the town is turning everything over to housing. We have a church And we're not the only ones with the church in a state of no use, with different things that the church, as a church, does with the church that's surplus. Every time a church is surplus in our area, everyone thinks housing, housing, housing. No, in fact, a historical building, like Faneuil Hall in Boston, a very historical building. When it was not in use, they got it, they used the whole inside so the public can come in and get the splendor of the building and see it. They can't do that with condominiums built into a church. If that was something like a performing arts center or an art gallery, or if at the time, if we didn't have a library next door and we were wondering what to do with the library, that church is beautiful. In fact, that church has the longest aisle in the whole Archdiocese of Boston. There were people that had weddings there. That is the longest walk aisle in the whole Archdiocese. That church does not come under the automatic defense trigger mechanism for the 100-year-old historic building. However, there are two other areas where it can be defended as one. It's of architectural significance to the town of Braintree, in that it is the largest assembly room in the whole town. I don't know about St. Catherine's, but that is the largest assembly room. There's a huge assembly room most people are used to in the main church. There's another one off it, then there's a huge one downstairs. I was all through the church on the inspectional tour. I really like the building, and I'm the one who's really trying to save it that I know of. I don't want to save it in the sense that it be used for housing. That was never my intent. In fact, I came to defend the church, and I think I've been doing it good. This town has 3 defense mechanisms no other community has, and it needs to be aware of that. You're not in the same position other communities are in. One, you have the Community Preservation Act for funds to maintain and keep up historical buildings. That was initiated by a church when they came up with that was in trouble somewhere in the country. I don't know if it was the Old North Church or what, but one of them was. And then the other thing that you have is the demolition protection moratorium. Other communities that had churches liquidated didn't have that either. You have that moratorium. We can shield the church and we can protect it. And we can do that if you let the historical committee continue in its start trains. They can't do it under the automatic defense mechanism, 100 years old, because it's not. But it is of architectural significance, and it may bear historical significance as well, that they'd have to do a study on it. So we can shield the church from demolition and probably even protect the inside as to how the inside will be reused. We can restore the congregation, and we can hand it all back to the Archdiocese, who will be willing to take it back if we take away the golden egg. Unlike other cities and towns in our area with churches looking for money, we have a golden egg. We got a facility over there that's worth a fortune. So they ran right to Braintree to look at our stuff and take it, because the other areas aren't worth that. If we shield the church with the moratorium, with the demolition protection clause, we have, like I said, CPA funds, which the church may or may not know we had when they made the decision to liquidate it. Those are incentives to keep a historical building and listen to the town leaders as far as the church goes. Then the church, if we keep this zoning in Zone B, we're taking away the golden egg. You make this Zone C, that land is worth 10 times more. The church is going to be worth 100 times more wanting to get rid of it. You leave this in Zone B, you shield the church, and we let them know that we have funds and that we're not happy just yet with anything. We're not attacking anyone. We think the fine job on planning and stuff, but we got to realize here, this right here is a ring road coming in off the main highway. That is a ring road. The neighbors that are coming here to say that they want their privacy of a conservation area are incorrect. I've gone to planning meetings. I know a little bit about planning. When I see a ring road on a map, that's not for forest fire prevention, going around a forest. That is the next phase of the project. What you're seeing right here is very dense. What they're seeing over here is not dense. So they have a belief that they will have this privacy. That's phase 2. Once phase 1 is that dense and built, we go to phase 2 and we build out all through here.
10 more seconds, Mr. DiPaolo.
I wish I had more time, and I really think that I've made a significant statement. I think the board should table it or deny it on behalf of the residents. If I had more time, I could go in longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DiPaolo. I would just like to say that, you know, I got married in St. Thomas More, and it's a beautiful church, and it was a very long walk down the aisle, too, but, Council Reynolds.
Point of order? Point of information, I should say.
Absolutely.
I just want to correct the last speaker. CPA funds are not unique to Braintree. CPA funds are available to every community in the Commonwealth. CPA funds cannot be used to be purchased on any piece of property, building, historical or otherwise, above the town's assessed value, which the church is asking for a lot more money than what the assessed value for the town has here, so that is not an option. And the clause, the demolition clause, is actually a demolition delay, 75-year-old buildings, for delay of documenting historical aspects of a building only. It does not prevent a privately owned piece of property from being demolished. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Reynolds. The next person from the public that signed up is Kevin Jerry, 111 Conrad Street. Good evening.
Kevin Gary, 111 Conrad Street. I have a question to the developer on how much is a unit going to cost?
Yep,
wouldn't
just,
wanna
you-
speculate.
just have a conversation into the microphone so people can hear you, okay?
Sure. You know, they're going to sell at market value. We don't know what the market value is in today's world. In today's world, if they were built, I'd say they'd be somewhere in the 800,000 range.
Okay. So 800,000 in my house is worth average 660, I think you said, for the average house in Braintree. So if I sell my house, I can't move there. It doesn't do me any good. And my second point is that when you go from B to C and you have no more control over it, the developer could get a better deal from someone else, sell the property, and they can do whatever they want. So you're changing it and you have no guarantee of what's going to come from it. So that's my point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person is Nancy Kennedy. Good evening.
Good evening, Nancy Kennedy, 119 Blanchard Boulevard. First of all, when we're talking about, I know we're in dire straits with the override and all that. If it was me that didn't pay taxes all those years, I wouldn't get away with it. And I hope we're not going to let the Archdiocese get away with it. When that property is sold, they should back tax them all along because you'd be back taxing me. Second of all, I am 100% against this. You know I am. You know I am. I wish you didn't show me 26 houses in the first place. It would have been a little bit easier.
Can you just speak into the microphone? I'm sorry.
I think homes would be better than these. I am afraid, and you know, it's okay. You know what? We aren't going to be able to afford to live there. But somebody from out of Hingham or who knows where can come and afford to live there. We can't, even if we sell our homes. You can't. None of you can. I just, God forbid something, you know, you laughed at me last time. I lost someone like this. God forbid something happens to him, anybody can do what they want with the property. That's my major concern. And I know I'm getting better at the over 55, but I'm afraid if something happens to you or you decide to change your mind, we're in trouble. I don't want those big, huge buildings. I don't want what's on Hancock Street in my neighborhood. It's not that kind of a neighborhood. It's an older neighborhood, and I know the Archdiocese can't, I know you can't buy it without saying, you know, I'm guaranteed to do this. I understand that, and that's what my fear is. My fear is I think it should stay at the B. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, the next person is Jean O'Brien Bobeck. Good evening.
Hi, Jean O'Brien Boback, 153 Park Street. I'm totally in opposition to changing the zoning of this one-owner property to Residence C. our neighborhood, like I'm hoping the town councilors will do what the people elected you to do. Like, I passed in a petition signed by 90 people that are abutters and residents that are all opposed to this. Please don't change the zoning. You're not going to have many other opportunities in Braintree to have a large development of single-family homes. You're going to have opportunities for multi-unit dwellings in the MBTA-zoned areas. There are areas that are already zoned for multi-unit dwellings. This is not the place for it. Also, the town spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the master plan. I hope you'll pay attention to the master plan, where they said they wanted the neighborhoods preserved and protected. If you sell this, change this to Residence C, you are not protecting my neighborhood. And the biggest fear is no one has any recourse or protection if you change it to C. You have no legal commitment from anybody as to what will be built there. And I personally would not enter into an agreement like that when you have no protection for the town or the neighbors. And as Nancy said, most of us who are living in this neighborhood, we wouldn't profit enough from selling our homes to be able to afford these places. At the planning board meeting, Mr. Clements stated he's fine developing the property as Residence B. Let him do it. This is an area that has always been family-oriented, single-family homes. This is why I chose to live here. So I'm really asking the councilors to listen to the residents who are, 90 of them said, please don't change the zoning. It's a dangerous, slippery slope and no protection for anybody if you change it to C. So please don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Colleen Carroll.
Hi, I'm Colleen Carroll from 33 Hawthorne Road. I just want to say that it's the council's job to make sure laws and ordinances serve the people in the town. This ordinance is not going to serve that neighborhood or the people. It only serves the developer. And like the other speaker said, the developer can sell that property next year after he gets the change. And according to Ms. Santucci at the other meeting, 87 units can be put in there. So how is that helping or serving the people who are against it? And there's no guarantee that it'll be 55 and over. It's just his word. He can change it next year. I don't know him. I'm just saying in general. It has happened. And there's no good reason for rezoning it if he can build there on property B. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
The next person just listed, Anya. Good evening.
Good evening. I live on Old Elm Street, and my family bought the house from the builder back in 1950. It has a history of, there's 8 houses sandwiched in between Old Elm and Elm. 6 of those houses have always struggled with drainage, water. And the town tried to come in with a class request for the town to do something about the flooding there. And I think it was back in the 80s, they did come in and they put the town engineer came in, put a trench in there, but it didn't help anything at all. And they dug a 6-foot trench and put in stone, and it seemed to come up from underneath, so it was actually inviting more water into the situation. When the town worked with the engineers from the state to come in and redo that intersection, the people were trying to get something going there to help to alleviate the drainage problem that's there. Now, I attended the August 30th meeting with the builder. The developer here had hired, I believe, an engineering firm, and he did a study on that acreage that's going to be donated to the town, and he was kind of shaking his head like, you know, however they designed it, a drainage pipe coming from Home Park down into the backyards, behind the backyards of Hawthorne. There's like a cistern, so there's a break in the piping, if I understood this correctly, and then when there's a heavy rain, that cistern will fill, but then there's an outfeed pipe that would go all the way down toward Old Elm, and it just doesn't work. He just kind of shook his head like, what were they thinking when they designed and developed this? Now, the developer wants to give this property to the town, but we've been crying for years, decades really, to address the drainage problem there. And the argument finally was, we don't have it in the budget to fix it. And I'm wondering, you know, is the town really going to benefit from getting this? Is this a Trojan horse that now the responsibility is on your shoulders to fix it if it's donated to you? The other thing is, at this last planning board meeting, there was the argument being made that, is this really benefiting our residents B? Is it beneficial to our neighborhood? And this type of development is really, you're turning us into another Quincy. And, you know, you talk about, I'm hearing the conversation say, well, this development will bring in revenue, but there's also unforeseen costs to doing this kind of a development. So in the end, would we really benefit financially from doing this type of a development? I'm personally opposed to it. I don't know people that really feel good about seeing us turn into another Quincy with burgeoning development and not enough services, infrastructure to support that. And the traffic there is horrendous, and that's always been, you know, it's only getting worse. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's all of the folks that signed up for the general public for comments, but at this time, I'm going to allow anyone else that might have, that wants to speak, they can come up to the podium and state their name and address and speak.
Hi there, my name is Eileen Lewis. I'm at 32 Hawthorne, and I just want to say that traffic is a major concern. In 2019, I was part of a project called Traffic Calming of Hawthorne, and it was designed to slow traffic, to maybe perhaps direct traffic. But after meeting with town officials, I found out that Hawthorne Road is a collector road. And I'm like, wow, what's a collector road? And a collector road is a road that is designed to collect traffic, and so that it works with the flow to move traffic perhaps from Quincy or off Route 128 to other, roads. And so with that, COVID came, and that was a blessing and a curse, I guess, because it solved the traffic problem on Hawthorne as people were working from home. But I honestly oppose changing the zoning because the traffic right now is a nightmare between the hours of 3:30 and 5:30 when I can't back out of my driveway. I'm at the lower end of Hawthorne, and it is infuriating when you can't get out of your own driveway to drive my children to sporting events over at Watson. And Miss Jean Bolback, was in charge of getting some signatures for her petition, and it was unfortunate that I couldn't collect many more as the season began. So many people are unaware of what is going on in our town, and the church perhaps coming down and the zoning changing. there might be public knowledge, but unless it's in your backyard, people don't care. And I just wanted to say that no matter what traffic study can be done, it's always going to sway with the developer. And that's all I have to say. I just wish things could be more impartial and really have people look at the traffic on Hawthorne, because it's not a, it just doesn't seem residential any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, could you come up and state your name and address for the record, please, sir?
Thomas McLaughlin, 39 Blanchard Boulevard. I came to Braintree about 25 years ago. My wife has worked in the town schools for 21 years. For 21 years, my wife walked to school from Braintree, from Blanchard Boulevard down to East Middle School. And I can't tell you how many times she came home and told me that she almost got killed with the crossing guard in that intersection. So I can attest to the prior person's comments on that intersection, which is horrible to get through in the morning. People want to go through quickly. They don't want to stop. They don't look at anybody. They don't see anything but what they want to do, get through. So that's one of the problems they have down there. The second thing that I have in my mind is the developer heads come up and said the paper streets that are on the original plans, he's not going to use. But if he does get this zoning change, what's to prevent him from using those after he gets those that change? Now, my proposal might be is to deed over the paper streets to the abutting owners at the expense of the developer. I think the town also has to participate in it, as well as maybe the church and the developer. I don't know what the timing could be for that, but I think that should be something so that the resident can be rest assured that the developer will not change his mind and his verbal guarantees. The other thing that you might be aware of, there's a stone wall that goes from the bottom all the way up the hill. Now, some of the residents have said to me, well, are they going to take the stone wall down? Or are they going to say, we got to move it because that's on our property? So that hasn't been really answered to some of the people I've spoken to. So I'd like you, maybe the developer, to address those situations, those two situations, or 3 situations. The question is, as far as the traffic thing, is the developer going to pay for the traffic improvements, or is the town going to have to shoulder those improvements? I'm pretty much against the change in zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Steve DeCosta, 70 Blanchard Boulevard. I abut directly the woods. I have a paper street on my left-hand side as you look at the house. I am for this rezoning. And the reason why I say that is because, to me, there's 2 possibilities. Change it or don't change it, obviously. But to change it, we know what that's going to be. It's going to be the 55 plus. If we don't change it, it stays B. But with that being my understanding, I've been to every meeting, I've heard all this stuff talked about, is there is a possibility that it could be an assisted living home, not the 21 to 26 homes that have been talked about. So if that were to be the case, that's where my concern is. The probability of that happening to me, of the assisted living, is more than the possibility of Mr. Clements not developing the property as he has said. So because of all of that, I am 100% for the rezoning.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to talk for the first time?
Hi, I'm Claire Tui. I live at 29 Hawthorne Road, which is only 2 houses up from the church. My family's lived in that house since 1958. It was a great neighborhood to grow up in. We knew all our neighbors, we knew the people on the streets, and I'd just like to say I'd like it to stay a neighborhood.
Thank you. So we're going to let people talk once. So is there anybody else that would like to talk from the public? Okay, now I'm going to go back to the counselors, if the counselors have any questions or comments. Counselor Hume.
Mr. President, I sat on the ordinance and rules that address this, and I was in favor of it. I will be in favor of it tonight as well. But I just want to make a couple of comments. I live in the area, not right on Hawthorne or anybody, but down the street. I did attend St. Thomas More Church. All 3 of my kids were baptized there. They did their first communion there. So it does have a lot of meaning to me as well. Mr. Clemens has stated it will be for 55 plus and others, but we're here tonight just for the zoning change, just so everybody is aware of that too, and not the specific aspects of the project. But some things over the years, Braintree is known to being not open for business. And there's local banks that I've heard, talk to them specifically, and they will tell businesses, don't go to Braintree, they're going to make it difficult for us. We can't keep saying no, as the mayor has presented her budget before. We have a revenue problem, but we have a spending problem. And we can't fix our revenue without new growth, and that's not the only reason that I'm for this. I've been involved in town government for over 16 years, and anything that's become, I was on the school committee, and now I've been on the council. Residents don't like change, and I get it. I've been in Braintree since 1981. There was the small Stop and Shop. I lived over on St. Clair Street with just a little CVS. Now it's a huge plaza. If we kept saying no, none of the development in this town would have happened. We wouldn't have progressed and evolved as a town. So nobody likes change, and I understand that. We've heard from so many residents, both for and against, so it's not just all residents who are saying no to this. There's a lot of residents who we've received emails from, they've talked to residents, so there is definitely a split. Mr. Clemens is a developer who's a Braintree resident, and I think for him to be living in Braintree and want to do business in Braintree, I think it's a little bit maybe harder for him, because if the project doesn't go as planned and he does, upset residents, he's got to be the one who shops here, and he raised his kids here. They went to our Braintree schools. So the fact that he wants to do business here, I appreciate that. The Archdiocese has left that property abandoned for years. It's an eyesore. Who knows what's in the building that used to be the May Center that's been vacant for decades or however. But I am supporting it. I do listen to both of you. I appreciate all the residents coming out for and against this. Again, I will be supporting this tonight, though. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Obviously, I am going to support this. And I think my statements have been on the record at the Ordinance and Rules Committee. I've been involved in planning and development, land use in this community since 1993. I've had a great opportunity and seen many, many experiences and examples of good projects for our community. And they weren't just a good project for the community in terms of what the use, but then the expanding uses of our revenues. And I don't want to make this sound like it's all about money, but ladies and gentlemen, I think it's obvious to everybody in this room and around our town, Braintree's got a huge problem with money. Everybody wants basic services, additional services, but they don't want to pay for it. They think somehow someone else is going to pay for it. We need to do our own. We need to do our own financing, take care of our in-house keeping. And this community, unfortunately, there is a small, and I respect people's opinions and their fears and their uncertainty about changes, but that has ruled the day for too long in this community, where that minority of a voice drowns out the others who are open and understanding that we need to change to survive. Now, and unfortunately, a lot of those who cite that I don't like this and I don't like that, it has to do with change. I don't like change either. But if I chose to stay in my house, I'm going to lose my house because I'm not out making a living. I'm not out living. All right, that whole neighborhood around there used to be farms around there. And sure, there were people that came out back in those days and said, I don't want to see anything other than a farm there. Well, change happens, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. I'm not scolding. I'm just saying this is reality. In terms of traffic comes, you know, I courteously sat here and listened to people speak without interrupting them. And I'm hearing a lot of people in the audience right now that won't let me speak. So please, I ask you courtesy. Thank you. There is traffic problems in this town, and residential neighborhoods aren't causing our problems. It's cut-through traffic. It's where geographically located. At a major highway, intersections. They cut through our town because they can't afford to live in our town. Now, there are people who live in the south and west of us. They come through Braintree. That's just a fact. And we need to do a better job regionally to fix that problem, because our problem is do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, and look where we are financially. We are at the bottom of a barrel right now, looking up. And people can smirk what they want about it. It's easy to do nothing. It takes courage to do something. As a district councilor, I represent more than 90 people. It's close to 6,000 people. I've held public meetings and I've spoken to people about this particular project. And overwhelmingly, people like it because it is a neighborhood. It's residential. It's not destroying a neighborhood. We spent a lot of money on a master plan. I sat on that master plan committee. That master plan got approved. And that master plan calls for protecting residential neighborhoods. That's what's happening here. This is protecting a residential neighborhood, because the use of this property right now, you can build daycare there. They cited the Dover Amendment. You can build schools, daycare centers. You want to talk about traffic? That's going to cause traffic. You can build assisted living facilities. You want to talk about destroying your neighborhood? That's going to destroy your residential neighborhood. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to open your minds and understand that there's more than one way to solve a problem. My goal is to make sure that the community is protected. My district is protected. And I have an obligation that no one here has a golden goose, as far as I know. Money's not going to fall from the sky like manna. We have to make it happen, ladies and gentlemen. We have to change on our terms. This is a good use. And I'm hearing a lot of, I don't trust, I don't trust, I don't trust. I've engaged all of you. I've been open, I've answered every one of your emails. That's called engagement. It's called transparency. It's called being honest. I have spent a lot of time working with Mr. Clements and his team, with the Archdiocese. I've used my experiences to make sure that I verified and confirmed. My due diligence is a practice that I practice every day. I'm not asking you to say, Joe, I trust you, but I'm asking you to give me some consideration that what I'm doing is good for our community, because we can't please everybody. Someone is going to be disappointed. I certainly wouldn't be in this job if I what my goal was to try to please everybody. But what I want to do is what's good for our community. This is a good option to maintain a residential neighborhood. If people can't afford to live there, they say, this isn't subsidized housing. That's further down the street in the other part of the neighborhood called Independence Ave. That's subsidized housing for elderly, for seniors. For us to discriminate against people because they have the ability to live in this community, to live in a townhouse, that's not foundational reason to say no. I'd love to hear alternative solutions, ladies and gentlemen. That's the name of the game. If we don't like something, please give an alternative solution instead of boo-hooing it and saying, I don't trust them, it'll never work. Well, fine. What will you work in your mind? That's engagement, and that's what we've been doing here. This started in January of last year. So I tried not to lose my composure, and I hope I haven't, but, you know, I spend a lot of time in this town. I've heard a lot of hyperbole of why things won't work. Never saying, how can we get there? Because life changes, this town changes, and we're not in good shape. And it's a result of people saying, no, 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 I'm fearful, I don't like change. Well, we got a big bill to pay today. The piper has come to call as a town. And our beloved school system is one of those potential casualties that make all of our homes valuable. And a townhouse that sells for $700,000 to $800,000 is going to benefit every single house in that neighborhood, single-family home. Every single one. It's going to maintain buffers. That's one of the other things that's said in our master plan. Protect neighborhoods with buffers. You've got buffers there. Protect open space. This project would protect open space. So, you want to talk about a master plan? This is in harmony with the master plan. This developer has money already on the table with the town to work on traffic mitigation for that major intersection of Elm, Adams, and Hawthorne. He has told me that he has a commitment to work on that and utilize that money with the town. But if we do nothing, all of those problems I heard a gentleman cite, they're not going away. We need to do something. Action makes things happen. And taking no action allows someone else to dictate the terms to us. And I'll be darned if I'm going to let somebody else dictate the terms of what Braintree should be. Someone has to stand up and say, this model has not worked. It's time to change, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Ringus.
Thank you, Mr. President. First off, I want to thank all the residents who provided feedback on this proposal. I know for some of you, it's quite an emotional issue. We've heard many comments, many statements. We've received many emails, both for and against this proposal. I want to thank Mr. Clements and Attorney Modestino for their professional presentations, their flexibility over the past few months amid multiple hearings, cutting to the chase. After reviewing the planning board minutes in their vote, after chairing the ONR meetings, hearing from a large number of residents, I, as I did at the ONR meetings, will be supporting this proposal in rezoning. As currently zoned, Mr. Clements could build single-family homes and/or other group settings like a daycare. A use that would still net Mr. Clements substantial profits, but also result in as much, if not more, traffic than the proposed townhomes, and would result in the loss of open space. Over the past few years and through meetings related to the master plan, residents have continually voiced support for preserving open space, for veterans housing, and for an over 55 community. This proposal hits two of those marks, as we have over 55 housing and we're preserving a wooded area. I understand the position of residents who are hurt, saddened by the loss of St. Thomas More. I'm a lifelong Braintree resident, and I would note that the facade of the church has always been a landmark as I've traveled into East Braintree. I also am a lifelong resident of St. Francis of Assisi Parish, and I know that the closure of that would have a substantial impact on me. With that said, though, the point is somewhat moot. The Archdiocese has determined that St. Thomas More will no longer serve as a house of worship, and as such, they are a private landowner looking to sell a piece of property. I think perhaps the Archdiocese could have and should have been in better communication with residents of the area and that segment of the community that worshiped there for so many years, but that's not something that I fault Mr. Clements or Attorney Modestino for. I also appreciate the fact that Mr. Clements has said he will attempt to preserve the church with some sort of separate development from the townhomes, which could hopefully dull the blow as much as possible to those who have lost their religious focal point. I note the unease of some that this change could allow a developer to change course or sell to someone else. It's a risk. It is a risk. But Mr. Clements has said that he is going to build these proposed townhomes. He's worked with the town on projects in the past. As Councilor Hume indicated, he's a long-time or Braintree resident. To violate his word would make future projects with the town virtually impossible. So I trust that he's going to move forward with what he said tonight. I have stood against various developers in the past. I was an opponent of a plan that would have allowed multi-floor buildings along Washington Street a few years back. More recently, I stood against the Zalm project, which I thought was too large for the area in which it was proposed. But with that said, our answer cannot always be no to every developer, and we need to be flexible moving forward, especially given the town's needs to create new revenue streams. I have heard people make comments or send emails that somehow townhomes are a lesser form of housing. These are privately owned residents. They're not apartments. And as we move forward, we do need to realize as a community that the housing market is changing, and the traditional single-family homes are not the be-all and end-all anymore. We need to be mindful that we always want to maintain the community that we all love, the reason we live here, but we have to balance that with new ideas and new modes of living. So I do want to thank everyone for all their comments, all their passion, but this is something I will be supporting tonight, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baraka.
Thank you, President Ryan, and I want to thank all the residents who have contacted the council and who spoke this evening. It is not easy to come to the podium. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And to echo some of my colleagues on the council and to reiterate, tonight, this is a vote on a zoning change, not on a project. A lot of the issues we've received notes about and heard about this evening, whether it's in residence A, B, or C, are issues that will be taken up with rigor by our planning board, not by the town council. That does not fall within our purview. And I know Mr. Clements has gone to great lengths to describe the project he envisions on this property. And as Councilor Ringus mentioned, the council also does not have the legal authority to bind him to the plan. However, in my observations, Mr. Clements has always held true to his word, and I have no reason to doubt him this evening. With this request, like others before it, we are zoning in reaction to a proposal rather than changing our zoning proactively to incentivize the kind of proposals that will help us achieve our community's goals and aspirations. So how did I best weigh the inherent trade-offs of working to achieve these goals while balancing the imperfect way we are going about it? For guidance, I turned to the town's recently completed master plan. And here I find much evidence as to how this rezoning advances some of the very goals and aspirations we set for ourselves, including incentivizing the redevelopment or repurposing of underutilized properties to become more vibrant, and working towards a diverse supply of housing that is well-designed to harmonize with the context of the surrounding neighborhoods. Additionally, welcoming more multifamily developments helps solve a long-standing problem that I continually hear about from my constituents. People are looking for more housing options so they can stay in or return to the town they love. Complementing this solution, I see additional benefits. Multifamily housing promotes sustainability. Dwellings closer together allow for the preservation of more open space, which means more trees to provide energy or reducing shade, less asphalt, which reduces runoffs into our rivers, and fewer lawns, which reduces water usage. Multifamily housing also contributes to the economy. This rezoning request in particular puts people within a half a mile of the family-run businesses in Braintree Square who depend on foot traffic to thrive. Rather than speculating as to what might be lost, I can envision all that can be gained by rezoning this area of town, providing more housing options, promoting sustainability, and advancing economic growth among them. For all these reasons and more, I will be voting in favor of this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Council Flaherty.
Thank you. As a member of the Master Plan Steering Committee, I was part of an extensive conversation around what our community's vision is around growth. You know, my husband grew up in the neighborhood that attended, in a neighborhood that attended St. Thomas More. He has many memories of that institution, and I can well understand how difficult it is to see that change, that was such a part of the fabric of our lives. So the change, when we're confronted with it, it's important to turn to the vision of what the community wants to see in the future, because that's our only choice. We can't stay where we are. So in that conversation, as part of the Master Plan Steering Committee, there was consistent support for several things. One is greater diversity of housing. Another is preservation of open space, development of senior housing, historical preservation, addition of affordable housing. I like this project, and I hope that it comes to fruition. But it isn't, my vote this evening isn't for this project in particular, it's just for the zoning of the area on which it might be built. So the question before me is whether to leave this zoning untouched or to change it to Res C. If we leave it untouched, that invites the development of a new subdivision of single-family homes, or perhaps a daycare, or perhaps assisted living, which doesn't move Braintree forward in any of those areas that I listed. Residence C, on the other hand, opens the door for it. However, the master plan also asks us to be mindful of the scale of the development that we invite. Residence C opens the door to greater density of development, but the scale of that development is still tightly controlled. There are many areas of Braintree where Residence C properties abut Residence B without disrupting the character of our community, which is what the master plan asks us to make sure we do not do. I think it can be done well in this location, and in doing so, we can capitalize on some of the goals put forward in our master plan. And for that reason, I will support this measure tonight.
Thank you. Any other councils like to speak? Councilor Moran.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to first thank the residents for their thoughtful, informative, and courteous way in which they've presented their views during tonight's hearing and during the previous two hearings of the ordinance committee on which I'm a member. I've given this matter very careful consideration. I've considered the views of the residents, both pro and con. I've listened to the developer and his counsel. I've read Councilor Reynolds' very thoughtful correspondence and spoke to him at length in person as well. I give a great deal of deference to the views of the councilor representing the district in which this parcel is located, and I commend him on his efforts to fully inform his constituents and the council. I'm cognizant of the risk entailed in this zoning change, that an apartment building is a right of use in the proposed zoning change. I believe this risk is mitigated by one major factor, and that is profit. The developer would not yield as much profit from an apartment building as he would from townhouses. Moreover, the risk of adverse development is not removed by denying a rezone. The applicant could use the Dover Amendment to place assisted living under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3, assisted living, daycare, or a number of religious or educationally related purposes. This could include private schools, residential treatment, group homes, recreational vehicle camps, parking lots. These are all previously approved by court uses under the Dover Amendment. It is my view, based on the presentations that I've heard, and that the proposal that Mr. Clements is making is the most beneficial for the town and can be done without an adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood. Similar developments have been interwoven into the fabric of our community in other neighborhoods for decades successfully. I've lived my entire life in this town. And St. Thomas More is where where I was baptized, my brother was baptized, my sister was baptized. But I also believe that Braintree needs this type of option of 55 and over, so that longtime residents have the option to downsize within this hometown, within my hometown. It has been stated previously that the average home value in Braintree is around $600,000. Respectfully, during this meeting, I looked on Zillow, and my 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 1949 constructed colonial is worth $876,000 now. I can afford to move into this, and it's just a regular old colonial on an undersized lot. It also presents less of a burden to residents than constructing 26 homes. I acknowledge the risk inherent in the vote. I would hope the town would take steps to mitigate this risk by becoming involved in this project. I regret that the Archdiocese failed to provide an opportunity to the town, or more of an opportunity to the town, to shape the request for proposals that would have provided assurances to the residents. Unfortunately, we're well beyond that time. I'll support this zoning change. I'll continue to work to ensure that a project that complements the character of the neighborhood results. Thank you.
Councilor Quilty.
I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who came out tonight and for sharing your thoughts with us about this issue. I don't want to, go through what everyone else has already said. I'm not going to reiterate what everybody just said, but I want everyone to know that I am going to vote in favor of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Maglio.
Thank you, President Ryan. I agree. I don't have anything to add to the eloquent statements of my colleagues. What I do want to say is that the folks that have come out tonight and have spoken and shared information, it's really important information. And voting for a change in zoning doesn't in any way de-emphasize the importance of making sure that when the development is built, that the flood issues for Old Elm are mitigated in some way, that the open space is preserved in some way, that the paper streets are taken into consideration. These are really important things, and these factors are things that will be vetted as it goes through its actual permitting and licensing process. So for now, I too will vote to change this to Residence C.
Thank you. I also want to thank the residents that came out tonight to speak for or against this. I appreciate you taking part in this process. I know it's very important. It's your neighborhood, and you want to make sure that whatever happens at this location is in the best interest of the neighborhood as well. I live in the neighborhood. I got married at St. Thomas More Church. A lot of the things that folks talked about, I have a paper street next to my house. My backyard gets flooded every rainstorm from the property behind my house. So I hope, you know, traffic, my kids were never allowed to play in the street because they get killed by a car cutting through the neighborhood, coming from Quincy, going someplace else. So this is stuff, you know, traffic's been a problem in the town a long time. And, but I do live in the neighborhood, you know, the property, it's a blighted property. I went up there and I almost damaged my car in the parking lot. I almost hit a giant pothole and obstruction in the middle of the parking lot. And that, you know, the school in the back part of the property has just been abandoned ever since I moved to Braintree, you know, 27 years ago. It's always been abandoned. So, you know, putting something better in there, I'm really hopeful we can have a better part of the neighborhood down there. St. Thomas More is closed. There's nothing we can do about that, and I don't really see any benefit in letting the church stay there abandoned. It's just not going to get any better. The idea of 55-plus housing, I hear that from a lot of people in the town, that's something people are looking for. It's right now, we don't get any taxes from that property. We get 0 taxes from that property. And if we can get new revenue from the property, as was discussed tonight, the town is in dire needs of new revenue. I'm going to be supporting this. Thank you. Okay. Is there any further discussion from the council? All right, hearing that, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved, Mr. President.
Second?
You have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That's unanimous. Do we have a motion for 24009?
Mr. President, I would move that the town vote to rezone 2 parcels of land identified as 338 Elm Street and is shown on Assessor's Map 2071, Plot 5, and 0 Elm Street, also known as 7 Hawthorne Road, and is shown on Assessor's Map 2065, Plot 34, from the Residence B zoning district to the Residence C zoning district.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is I'm sorry. Why don't we take a 5-minute recess? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. I'm going to be starting the meeting in 1 minute. Could everybody please take your conversations outside? Hi, Jeannie. So please take your conversations outside. Thank you so much, folks, for coming tonight. Okay, we're going to reconvene the Braintree Town Council for Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. And the next item on the agenda is 24016 Planning Board Zoning Ordinance Text Amendment Section 135608 Floodplain Protection District to take up any action related thereto. This requires a public hearing. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. I'm going to refer to Councilor Ringus, Chairman of the Committee on Ordinance and Rules, for a recommendation regarding Order 24016.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Ordinance and Rules met earlier this evening. We did vote unanimously for a favorable recommendation to the full council as to Order 24016.
Thank you, Councilor Ringus. Would anyone from the mayor's staff like to speak on Order 24016? Hello again.
Hello again. This one's not nearly as snazzed up as the last zoning amendment, but I'll try to make it as exciting as possible. Thank you, Mr. President and members of the council, and also Ways and Means. Met with them early this evening, as noted by Mr. Ringus. Favorable recommendation. Also received a favorable recommendation from the planning board with a recommendation. Just a little bit of background. I was here in early 2023 with a major overhaul to our floodplain bylaw. This was ignited from a community visit from DCR, at which time they did an extensive review of some files, looked at our bylaw, talked about the floodplain map updates, and they were of the opinion that we needed to make some revisions to our bylaw, floodplain bylaw, to be compliant with FEMA. And FEMA sort of sets the standard for floodplain. They make up the floodplain maps. They say who's going to flood and who's not going to flood. So we took that on. We made those changes, and we vetted that ordinance prior to submitting it to the council through the state, got the blessing from the state, went through the whole thing, go to submit it to them, and they had some problems with it. So a little disappointed, I have to say. I've included the correspondence here in the file because it's sort of a negative reflection, and had some earlier comments, you know, did you get it right this time? And well, I hope I did, because I have the blessing from FEMA. And if FEMA's wrong, then I have no problem being wrong. So with that, minor revisions as noted here. I've included the existing text for the council as well as the revised text. A lot of it deals with variances to the floodplain, and then some renumbering. At the planning board meeting, Chair Kim Crowa had brought up some things. She is a land use attorney and has been attending all kinds of different webinars and conferences on the MBTA 3A zoning, like many of us here have as well. And there's been some discussion around a lot of communities require special permits for development in the floodplain. Braintree does as well. So there was a recommendation with that unanimous vote, and that is detailed in the recommendation, to make minor adjustments to Section I, breaking up number 1 into 1A and 1B. And what that essentially says is if you're going to be working in the floodplain and you're in any of our multifamily community overlay districts, that compliance with the floodplain is going to be reviewed under site plan review, and you're not required to obtain the special permit. So same standards, same bylaw, same engineering requirements, just reviewed all in the context under the site plan review requirements that we've laid out in those particular overlay districts. Available for any questions, comments, or cover anything else that you'd like, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any councilors that would like to speak or have any questions on 24016? Okay, hearing no questions or comments from the council, is there anyone from the general public that would like to speak on Order 24016. Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move, Mr. President.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Do we have a motion for Order 24016?
Mr. President, I would move to approve Order 24016 as submitted with Planning Board recommendations.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. The next, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is 24017, Mayor FY24 Supplemental Appropriation Number 1. Take up any action related thereto. This requires a public hearing. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So move, Mr. President.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. I'm going to refer to Council Baraka, Chairwoman of the Committee on Ways and Means, for a recommendation regarding 24017.
Thank you, President Ryan. The Committee of Ways and Means met on this issue earlier this month, and we're sending to the full council unanimously with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the mayor's office that would like to speak on this matter? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. I'll try to keep my comments very brief. The SUP that's before you today represents three motions specifically for overtime at the police and fire departments, as well as bills, or funding for bills related to utility expenses at our school facilities through DPW. In total, these items represent two of the $3 million that the mayor discussed earlier in her presentation for the fiscal 25 budget. These are obviously fiscal 24 expenses, but they're treated as base building expenses that essentially were not budgeted in the fiscal 24 or adopted budget, but are essentially bills in hand as we describe them for the Ways and Means Committee. They are funded through the use of fiscal 23 certified free cash. As I presented to the committee members at Ways and Means during our Ways and Means Committee, we view free cash as a last resort. The supplemental that will be has been the supplemental number 2 that's been filed with the council and in front of you today or to this evening funds all the additional supplemental appropriations without using or without proposing to use free cash. So we are looking to move forward with that approach as a policy going forward. But we recognize that these are large sums due, and for that reason, we thought it was prudent, responsible, and expedient to file these being paid with free cash in order to make sure they were funded.
Thank you. Do any of the councilors have any questions or comments? Councilor Maglio.
So I will comment briefly about this. One of the issues that we discussed a couple of times at our Ways and Means Committee meeting is, and it's been alluded to or referred to tonight, is the fact that these were not unknown figures at the time. These were just figures that were lowballed or underestimated or just changed in order to put it into a budget that would be approved. So when you talk to the folks who run the numbers in these departments, they're ending up exactly where they thought they were, and yet they were told not to submit that into the budget. And I think it's really important that everybody knows that, because we spend the month of May drilling down every single night, asking questions, and staff can't be in the position of saying something that they know it's not factually accurate. That's kind of the antithesis of having this open public meeting process and trying to have transparency. It's also what gets us into financial trouble. And so I am really pleased that moving forward, we are not going to see that kind of request or shadiness with our budget, and that it will be open and transparent, and I appreciate that. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, Councilor Baraka?
Thank you. Thank you, President Ryan. I want to tag on to what Councilor Maglio said, because we had an extensive discussion about this at the Ways and Means Committee meeting, and I want to thank you, Councilor Maglio, because your question submitted in advance sort of uncovered this point of discussion. And it's extremely disheartening that we need to revisit this budget request as a supplemental, because it should really be reserved for costs that are truly unexpected or extremely hard to estimate. And we acknowledged at Ways and Means that public safety overtime is one of those expenses. Utilities is a fixed cost, and it's not. So I just want to quote to really put a fine point on Councillor Maglio's previous comments. I want to quote from what's in the document packet. Quote, "The school utilities budget that was initially submitted last year was approximately $2.1 million. This was reduced first to approximately $1.4 million, then reduced again to the current budget of $1.3 million. This was done to achieve the DPW's portion of the townwide savings that we were instructed to realize," unquote. This was a known cost, undisclosed to the Ways and Means Committee and the Council during last year's budget hearing. And again, to echo Councillor Maglio, I want to commend Mayor Joyce and Director Esmond, who have committed to budgeting as closely as possible to the true cost of services to minimize these unexpected requests for funding. So we are obligated to pay these bills. The money has been spent, and of course, we're going to literally keep our lights on in our school buildings, and I will be supporting this evening. But thank you again, Councillor Maglio, for your work on that.
Councilor Flaherty?
So my comments are mainly related to the utilities budget overruns from last year, because I also was on the Ways and Means Committee at that time, and we spent a long time reviewing that. So the purpose of budget supplementals is to account at the end of the fiscal year for expenses that were either too difficult to predict from the outset, like overtime often is, or were unexpected altogether. No one expects the budget to be perfect, but I think that this body and the public we represent do have a right to expect the departments that come before us during the budget review process to present their respective budgets with accuracy and forthright clarity about the expectations we should have about the budget's overall performance. If the sum of a departmental budget is based on an assumption that a supplemental will be needed to cover known costs, that fact should be plainly represented during the budget review process, and in this case, it was not. The Council's review of the budget is the only opportunity for public scrutiny of any non-school aspect of the budget. However dire our financial predicament is at present, I am grateful that we are facing it head-on. Looking at our budget through rose-tinted glasses has not served us well, and the decision of this administration to abandon that habit fosters the transparency that the budget review process deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilors with comments, questions? Hearing none, I'm going to open it up to the general public. Is there anyone that would like to speak on Order 24017 from the general public? Could you come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name's John Cass, 1834 Washington Street. So on the supplemental budget issue, there was an additional supplemental budget of $3.5 million. I went back and looked at the town's financial statements for the last 10 years and found that these amounts for supplemental budget. So you can find the budget on the town website. A supplemental in 2014 was $2 million. In 2015, it was $5.4 million. In 2016, it was $2.1 million. In 2018, it was $6 million. In 2019, it was $5.4 million. And in 2020, it was $2.6 million. In 2021, it was $380,000. And in 2022, it was $523,000. I'm not sure what it was in 23. These amounts look very similar to me to what we experienced over, so the amount of $3.5 million looks very similar to me to what was experienced over the last 10 years. In fact, given the supplemental budgets were in order of $5 to $6 million sometimes, you might argue $3 million, oops, sorry, my phone keeps on switching off, $3 million or so is not unreasonable. We actually did very well in 2021 and 2022 with supplemental budgets. You know, so we've had similar situations in the past where different mayors have known about these factors, and also the supplemental budgets that we did have were coming from places like the police budget. So I'm just really kind of shocked with everybody complaining about the fact that we have a supplemental budget when you look over the budgets for the last 10 years, and in many instances it was pretty much the same thing. And I'm not saying that there wasn't something else going on, but I looked at this and it doesn't seem unreasonable. The problem that we have is that we don't have any spare cash. And so the extra $3 million is really difficult at this moment. So can we just focus everybody together in keeping as a community together? And I don't know, I mean, I certainly didn't support the last administration as I, you know, supported the current administration, but let's try and think about how we're trying to bring the whole community together as we look ahead for the override, right? And I just wanted to get those facts out there because I went back and looked through the town budgets, and it just didn't seem to be all that much of a difference from previous years. That was the point that I wanted to make.
Is there anyone else from the general public that would like to speak? Okay, hearing no one else from the general public, I'm going to entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. So we have three motions on 24017. Councilor Rengus.
Number one is to Police Department overtime that the sum of $684,000 be transferred from fiscal year 2023 certified free cash to be transferred to the Police Department overtime accounts, and further, that the Director of Municipal Finance be authorized to allocate said sums to and among various line items affected thereby.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Councilor Rengus.
Two, school utilities budget, that the sum of $341,000 be transferred from fiscal year 2023 certified free cash to the Department of Public Works School Utilities Program 19 electricity account, and a sum of $562,000 be transferred from fiscal year 23 certified free cash to be transferred to Department of Public Works School Utilities Program 19 natural gas account.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Councilor Rengus.
And Fire Department overtime that the sum of $425,000 be transferred from fiscal year 2023 certified free cash to the Fire Department overtime accounts, and further, that the Director of Municipal Finance be authorized to allocate said sums to and among various line items affected thereby.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. For new business, the next item is that we have a request for same-night action on Order 24023. Does any councilor member object to same-night action on Order 24023? Hearing none. So we are going to be voting on this matter tonight. 24023 is from the mayor, authorization to hold a special election asking voters whether they approve of an increase to the town's levy limit in the amount equal to $8 million for fiscal year 25, or take up any action related thereto. And the ballot question will be, shall the town of Braintree be allowed to assess an additional $8 million in real estate and personal property taxes for the purpose of funding the following departmental expenses: general municipal government, $2.5 million, school department, $4 million, and to fund an override stabilization fund for general municipal and school department operations, $1.5 million for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024. Does anyone from the mayor's office like to speak on this matter? Hello again.
Hi.
Mayor Joyce.
Good evening. Thank you. I did not prepare specific comments for this particular motion or request, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Also, our Finance Director, Mike Esmond, is available to answer any questions, but we're very appreciative of the council's willingness to address this with same-night action, and would look forward to the support of putting this request to the voters and giving them a role to participate and have a voice in this decision. Going into the budget planning for fiscal year 25 and knowing that we had a structural gap to address on the operational side, I think, as I had mentioned in my previous comments, we did look at cutting as the only option, and we looked at buying our way out, so to speak, as an option as well. And I think as we tied that to a multi-year look ahead, there really wasn't a solution that stuck out either way. I think we have done a lot of analysis to be as mindful as we could to prepare an override request that would be sustainable through fiscal year 28. While that does come with very tough management goals that we will achieve, we are trying to be as respectful as we can with the ask. We looked at trying to reduce the override request to below 8 million, and as we compared that to the look ahead, we didn't feel that that would be enough to keep us in a situation that was sustainable past fiscal year 25. So with the override stabilization account, we will be providing a resource for us to extend the benefit of the override through fiscal year 28. And would look forward to the support of that this evening, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Do any councils have any comments or questions regarding this matter? Council Moore.
Mayor, could you explain why you chose to raise 1.5 million through the override rather than through the use of free cash for the stabilization fund that you're seeking?
Sure. Well, the use of one-time funds to fund sustainable operational expenses is something that we wanted to get away from. So going into fiscal year 25, we were wanting to solve the problem without free cash. We also realized that our townside reserves and free cash right now, after the supplemental requests that were just voted on, are around 8.9 million. That's our rainy day fund. We also have a stabilization account just for general stabilization or unexpected expenses. The general guidelines on a free cash should be generally 10% of your operating budget. Our operating budget is around 165 million. And stabilization funds should be at least 5%. Our stabilization fund today is around $9,000, and our free cash is at 8.9 million. So we are trying to preserve that as much as possible, because if there is a further economic downturn or the event of something unexpected, we have very little to fall back on. So we did evaluate whether or not we could identify one-time funds to fill that gap, but we felt like that was not the responsible thing to do to paint the true picture, and was why we sort of pulled together the forward-looking plan and trying to be very conservative on our estimates. We do not want to be back before the voters next year with additional cuts or saying that, we need more money. So we were trying in our look ahead and our request to voters to build in the most reliable sustainability moving forward, and really get away from relying on any sort of one-time funds for something that would be reoccurring in an operational perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate that very thoughtful response. Thank you.
Do any other councils have any comments or questions? Council Hume.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Mayor Joyce, thank you. I just want to comment, too, on the budget presentation from earlier. I don't envy your position, and I don't think there's anybody in Braintree who envies your position as well, as you stated. It is a difficult position you are in, and I will say you've been in office 3 months, 4 months, we're in April already. You were handed a difficult task and in dire times, and I think you've handled it so well. I'm so impressed. You brought in such a great team. Like this budget presentation, it's hard enough to get this information together, but just again, this is the first time we're seeing it, but just glancing through it and your presentation tonight, like I appreciate the thoroughness that you and your staff have put together, and all the department heads. Nobody wants layoffs to happen. Nobody wants cuts to happen. I know in my day job, we had cuts in my office, 20 people out of my office. It's not a good thing. But the company needs to make money. The town needs to be able to pay for its expenses. So I understand that and appreciate it. It's a difficult time for everybody. I will be supporting this order tonight to put it to the residents, to the voters, to ask for an override, because I think they should have the say. I know residents are struggling, as the town is as well. So it's going to be up to the voters whether they want this or not. So I'm going to vote for this to give it to the voters. But again, I really, really appreciate what you've done. I think you've handled this so well, and appreciate your transparency and thoroughness and just the comprehensiveness in such a short time that you were able to deliver to us. And you've shown the team that you've brought in is just great, doing a great job in very difficult times. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you. Over the last 5 years or so, I have watched our budget each year as we have taken measure after measure to protect residents from higher costs without reducing the vital services that we all depend on. Braintree has emptied reserves, cleared out stabilization funds, burned through circuit breaker funding, sold town-owned land and a highway billboard, used emergency federal COVID funding, and finally our own free cash, just to avoid coming to this point. But we are out of options. Our costs go up at a rate that is higher than 2.5%, and the revenue streams that we have outside property taxes are not large enough to make up that difference. It is now time for Braintree to make a critical decision. Do we want to cut our services so that we will be able to pay our bills with the revenue we have, or do we want to pay more? I would like to personally commend every single department that serves this town for managing to get us this far on the increasingly slender budget that we have been able to provide. The people who serve this town invest both love and pride in the work they do, and they have done an excellent job. The task of this override is to determine if we want to continue to invest in them or if we want to do without the services they contribute. If the people who originally drafted Proposition 2.5 didn't recognize that costs go up faster than 2.5% annually, there would be no provision in the law for an override. Indeed, this is an eventuality for most, if not all, communities. Braintree stands among the last few communities in our region to adopt one. So, putting this override on the ballot places our budget directly in the hands of residents, and I support giving them that choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Moran again.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the mayor and her staff for their work on this budget and for their transparency and availability during their planning. The town is placed in the position of having to choose between two options with significant adverse impacts, mainly because we've avoided making difficult choices for a number of years. I commend the mayor for her work and her willingness to face the harsh realities of our current financial circumstances. There are no good options before us tonight. Both will require sacrifice and impose hardship that should not be understated or dismissed by those in favor of an override or those opposed to one. Neither proposal is perfect. So what it comes down to, in my view, is which impact can be mitigated most effectively. I will vote to place an override on the ballot. The residents of the town deserve the opportunity to have a choice. The choice to increase the amount they pay for services and retain the level and quality of services to which they are accustomed. Or the choice to address our fiscal dilemma entirely through reductions that will impact all town services, and some of them profoundly. In order to mitigate the increase in taxes on the most vulnerable residents, I've advocated that the mayor provide a local option tax abatement for those seniors eligible for the state circuit breaker relief. I provided a copy of legislation that passed in the town that I previously worked for, and I hope that it is introduced by the mayor and adopted by the council. I'll explore every effort to control costs, and in addition, I will advocate for the creation of a special education stabilization fund to help mitigate the impacts of spikes in special education costs. As a community, we are at a crossroads. Whichever course we choose will have its perils. It will require common will and uncommon effort to successfully reach the destination of fiscal stability. But in its nearly 4 centuries of existence, Braintree's overcome every challenge before it, and I firmly believe we will prevail once again. So I'll be voting in favor of placing this on the ballot.
Thank you, Councilor Ringus.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be piggybacking some of the comments already made, but I want to thank Mayor Joyce for your stewardship through these difficult times and for your honest assessment of where our budget stands. I want to thank the department heads that are here tonight. I know they've worked diligently with some difficult numbers presented to them and trying to achieve that sort of budget goal that was set before them. And although all have worked hard on this issue, I want to specifically thank Superintendent Lee for his work over the recent weeks. I know he's had the daunting task of sort of publicly prepping his budget and has made every effort to mitigate the effects of possible cuts and been a calming voice for teachers facing the loss of jobs and students who have been struggling with what school will look like next year. His position has been an unenviable one, and I think he's handled it with grace and composure. I also want to thank the school committee members. I know Chairman Heeger is still here, but others have sat here tonight for a variety of hours. I sat in the same seat as many of them did, and I understand the difficulty that you, like Superintendent Lee, have faced to have to publicly debate and discuss such an emotionally charged issue is no easy task, especially knowing that 3 members of the school committee have been on the job just a few short months, like Mayor Joyce. Your task was difficult, and I appreciate the vote that you all took recently to try to save as many positions as possible with as many of the same standards that our parents and students expect. Obviously, we find ourselves in uncharted waters in sort of unprecedented times as we consider what will be a possible first in Braintree's history, the passage of a Prop 2.5 override. For many years, Prop 2.5 was a dirty word in Braintree. Twice in my sort of memory, when I was a high school student and a college student, overrides were attempted, and both of those overrides ultimately failed. As I entered sort of the political realm of Braintree as a town meeting member and then as a school committee member, I was consistently told that debt exclusions and 2.5s didn't pass in this town, and I was warned to never support one. But times have changed. New families have moved into town. We have a new generation upon us. A debt exclusion has passed, and because of that, we have a beautiful new South Middle School that many students enjoy today. Without a Prop 2.5, we face dire times. The loss of police, fire, and other services, and we have seen from sort of budget presentations the dire results that our school system might face if a 2.5 override is not passed. And there will be much talk in the weeks and months ahead to educate, and I'm hopeful that will come from the mayor's office, from the council as well, on what a Prop 2.5 looks like, or what our town will look like if a Prop 2.5 is not passed. Tonight, though, isn't about that. Our vote tonight is only to put this question for an $8 million override to the residents of this town. And as an elected official, this is, for lack of better words, a no-brainer. This is the exact sort of type of decision that should be presented to the residents, to be debated and to be decided by those folks. I look forward to supporting this tonight and seeing the dialogue that emerges over the weeks to come.
Thank you, Councilor Baraka.
Thank you, President Ryan. And I want to let residents know, and thank you, Mayor Joyce and Director Esmond, for sticking it out with us this evening. The budget hearings will begin on Monday. so not even a week away. Monday, May 6th, right here in Cahill Auditorium, beginning at 6 p.m. I urge everybody to please review the schedule, pay attention, learn and listen to each of the department's proposals, the questions that the counselor and the counselors on the committee ask, and send us your questions that you would like answered. When I went back and reviewed my remarks from last year in preparation for this evening, they echoed what I'd said the previous two, which is simply put, we need more money than we have. And now we are at the day of reckoning. The budget presented tonight no longer plugs gaps with one-time funding because there is no more one-time funding. Putting an override on the ballot provides Braintree's voters with the opportunity, the unique opportunity, to decide on the town's budget. Before the cuts are finalized, I believe voters should weigh in on how we move forward as a community. I will be supporting this motion tonight to put this to a town-wide vote. And I urge all citizens, if you're 18 or older, please register to vote if you are not already, and make a plan right now, today, to vote on June 15th, so your voice, however you decide to register it, can be heard about Braintree's future. Thank you.
Councilor Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll keep my comments brief, and I want to recognize the words and comments of the previous speakers this evening. I think that they're well thought out, and obviously it demonstrates their commitment to our community. I want to thank the mayor as well for your leadership that you've shown in such a short amount of time. I am a big advocate for sticking the stake in the ground and dealing from reality and going from there. You presented what reality is as it pertains to our revenue problem. And the simple math is that Braintree does not have sustainable revenue streams to cover the year-over-year cost increases of our basic services. The mayor is correct in saying we need to align our basic services with the real amount of revenue currently available to us. Therefore, for the near term, we need to make strategic cuts and increase our real estate taxes in a smart fashion. For the long term, we need to create new, recurring, and reliable revenues. As a fiscal conservative, raising taxes is never my first choice. Frankly, it is my last choice. The situation as it exists today in Braintree requires some bitter medicine. This is why I will support placing the override question on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions for this matter? Okay. With that, I'm going to ask if there's a motion for Order 24023.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that the Town Council call a special town election in the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to be held on Saturday, June 15th, 2024, with polls opening between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. at Braintree High School, located at 128 Town Street, East Middle School, located at 305 River Street, and South Middle School, located at 220 Peach Street, pursuant to a warrant to be issued thereof, and to post said warning the inhabitants of the town of Braintree qualified to vote of said special election for the purpose of voting on the following question. Shall the town of Braintree be allowed to assess an additional $8 million in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of funding the following departmental expenses: general municipal government in the amount of $2,500,000, school department in the amount of $4 million, and to fund an override stabilization fund for general municipal and school department operations for $1.5 million for the fiscal year beginning July 1 of 2024.
I'd read that part too.
That the town of Braintree, pursuant to GL 59, section 212024, shall seek voter approval at the next special election on June 15th, 2024, to increase the town's tax levy limit effective for the fiscal year that begins on July 1, 2024, by $8 million for the purposes of operating the general municipal government in that amount of $2.5 million, the the school department in the amount of $4 million, and establishing a stabilization fund for municipal government and school department operations of $1.5 million. To that end, the town clerk is hereby directed to place the following question on the ballot. Shall the town of Braintree be allowed to assess an additional $8 million in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of funding the following departmental expenses: general municipal government, $2.5 million, school department, $4 million, and to fund an override stabilization fund for general municipal and school department operations, $1.5 million for the fiscal year beginning July 1 of 2024.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. So the next item is that we have, now we need to vote in favor of the special election to be held on June 15, 2024. There are a couple items we need to vote on from the town clerk. We need to have same night action for these two requests from the town clerk. It's 24028, town clerk call of the special election, June 15, 2024, or take up any action related thereto. And 24029, town clerk early vote by mail opt-out for special election, June 15, 2024, or take up any action related thereto. We have a request for same night action for order 24028 and order 24029. Does any council member object to same night action for either of these two orders? Okay, hearing none. Jim, do you want to give a brief description of this?
Good evening. I'm Jim Casey, and the chief election official for the town of Braintree, with the town council adopting order number 24023, authorizing a special election for Saturday, June 15th. We have to deal with some procedural things to get the train out of the station. The first one is item 24028. It's the call for the special election. It needs to be read in its entirety for the public to understand. And once this is approved by the council, these will be posted at the voting centers, so the general public will have an idea of when the election is going to happen. And it also allows me to start submitting the ballot to the printer so we can get ballots printed. So I ask if the council would consider adopting the call of the elections.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Casey. So is there any further discussion by the council or any questions? Hearing no further discussion or questions, is there a motion for order 24028?
Mr. President, I would move that with the call of the special election for June 15th, 2024, upon the request of the Braintree Town Clerk, the Town of Braintree through the Braintree Town Council, it is so ordered that the Town Council call a special town election in the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to be held on June 15th, 2024, with polls opening between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. at Braintree High School, located at 128 Town Street, for districts 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, at East Middle School, 305 River Street, for districts 3A, 3B, 4A, 4B, and at South Middle School, 220 Peach Street, for districts 5A, 5B, 6A, 6B, pursuant to a warrant to be issued therefore, and to post said warrant, warning the inhabitants of the town of Braintree qualify to vote of the said special election for the purpose of voting on the following question: shall the town of Braintree be allowed to assess an additional $8 million in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of funding the following departmental expenses: general municipal government, $2.5 million, school department, $4 million, and to fund an override stabilization fund for general municipal and school department operations, $1.5 million for the fiscal year beginning July 1 of 2024. And that would have a yes or a no.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is 24029. The town clerk, early vote by mail, opt-out for the special election, June 15, 2024, or take any action relative thereto. The Votes Act of 2022 provides municipalities to an option to opt into early voting in person and opt out of early voting by mail. Early voting in person is not mandated by the state. The process begins with the Board of Registers, which requires a 50% favorable opt-in provision or recommendation to the town council. Upon a 50% favorable recommendation, the town council would then need to vote within 45 days to have early voting in person. On April 24th, a meeting of the Board of Registers was held, and they voted not to exercise the opt-in provision unanimously. Members cited low participation levels for non-presidential elections, costs, and voters' ability to cast a ballot by absentee, and that this election will be held on a Saturday. As you may or may not recall, September 26, 2020, we had a Saturday election for the debt exclusion. We had a 27.7% turnout, which is pretty good for a local election. And I think they anticipate this would be pretty much the same. But early vote by mail is mandated by state law. However, the Vote Act provides municipalities to opt out by majority vote of the town council at least 45 days prior to election day. Today is day 46, so this is it. My recommendations for the council is to opt out for early voting by mail, and for the following reasons. Due to the delay in setting a special election date and the outcome of tonight's vote on early vote by mail, a ballot order could not be placed. The expected delivery of ballots, when I place it tomorrow, is somewhere would be May 9th to get any early voting ballots in place. And for election day ballots would be coming around May 13th. This past January, the state mailed every Braintree voter a postcard asking if they wanted to receive an early ballot for one or more of the 3 elections in 2024. Approximately 3,800 voters requested an early voted by mail ballot for all elections. The problem here is several hundred of these ballot requests were submitted by college students requesting that their ballots be mailed to their college address. They will be home before this election is being held. Due to the shortened window to prepare ballots for mailing, I have a real concern that an unacceptable level of these ballots will not be returned by 8 p.m. on election day. So any ballot received after 8 p.m. would not be counted. We are still receiving ballots back for the March 5th election this year. The special election is to address a financial hardship in the town. As the chief election official, I believe I have an obligation to point out the cost to execute the early vote option. That amounts to $15,000. The overall election cost would be $55,000 with early voting, or $40,000 with just an election day. So what needs to be done is the council to discuss Order 24029. If they want to opt out of it, they would need a favorable vote on that. The order before you is my recommendation to opt out. If it does not receive a majority, we will execute the early voting by mail.
Thank you. Do any councilors have any questions or comments on 24029? Council Baraka.
Thank you, President Ryan. Clerk Casey, what is the option for somebody who can't show up in person on June 15th?
The option is they can complete an absentee ballot request, and it will be mailed to their house, no different than early vote by mail. So they still have that option. Those who have disabilities and are unable to mark a ballot themselves, there is an online ballot process that they're eligible to sign up for. That's on the that will be through the State Secretary of State's website, where the portal would be set up for them. We had 5 individuals in March for the March 5th election doing that. And then naturally we have a Saturday election. Everybody always talks about Saturday elections will be a higher turnout than a Tuesday. We seem to, the one time we did it, it was very effective. I think this would be just as effective to.
Absolutely.
Thank you, President Ryan. Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. If I am out of town, disabled, or otherwise cannot be at my polling location on June 15th, I can call the town clerk's office up until what point to request an absentee ballot?
You cannot call us, you have to fill out an application.
You
We
fill
have
out
to
an
have We have to
application?
have a wet signature, okay? So, but early vote, if you're going to ask for an absentee ballot, we need it 5 days before Election Day. However, unlike early voting in person, on absentee voting, you can show up the day before the election to complete an absentee ballot. It closes at noontime. So you have some additional time there. Traditionally, when we had just absentee ballot options, we were getting 500 to 600 absentee ballots per elections. So now we generally get a handful because everybody's optioning for the other ones. It's just a simpler process and then have a mixed one. But one of the things you talked about, the reasons, also a reason is if you do not anticipate you will be able to get to your voting place for any reason, you can complete an absentee ballot. You may have children who are involved in sports and you're going to be at a softball tournament or some other event like that and you will not be in town, you can ask for an absentee ballot. So it's very flexible.
So why don't our next meeting next Tuesday, maybe you give a little update on that, make sure people understand how to get the absentee ballot next, on the 7th, okay?
Sure, I'll be posting things, based on what tonight's vote is, I'll be posting things on the website starting tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion for 24029?
Mr. President, I would move upon the request of the Braintree Town Clerk to the Town of Braintree to the Braintree Town Council so ordered pursuant to the Votes Act of 2022. The Braintree Town Council will exercise the opt-out provision for early voting by mail for the June 15th, 2024 special election or take any other action relative thereto.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to move the remaining measures under new business to the respective committees?
Mr. President, I would move to move the remaining measures under new business to their respective committees, that being 24018, 24019, 24020, 24021, and 24022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Want to say to everyone that our next meeting will be next Tuesday, May 7th, and be right here at 7:30 in Town Hall. I'd like to thank BCAM for televising our meeting tonight, Bill Needham and Jerry McCormick. And just wanted to say thank you to everybody that stayed in this very long meeting tonight and worked all day today and stayed in the long meeting tonight, all the town employees and the department heads and the mayor and her staff and all the members of the general public. Thank you very much for being here. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. We're adjourned.